So I'm reading from my book. Again. Chapter 20. Benefits derived through the withdrawal of joy from temporal goods. 1. Spiritual persons must exercise care that in their heart and joy they do not become attached to temporal goods. They must fear lest through a gradual increase their small attachments become great. Great things can come from little things, and what is small in the beginning can be immense in the end, just as a spark is enough to set a mountain on fire, and even the whole world. James 3:5. And they should never assure themselves that, since their attachment is small, they will break away from it. They will break away from it in the future, even if they do not do so immediately. If they do not have the courage to uproot it when it is small and in its first stages, how do they think and presume they will have the ability to do so when it becomes greater and more deeply rooted? Especially since our Lord affirms in the Gospel that the one who is unfaithful in little things will also be unfaithful in great things. Luke 16:10. Those who avoid small attachments will not fall into greater ones, but there is serious harm in little matters, since through them the harm has already passed beyond the enclosure wall of the heart, and as the saying goes, once begun, half done. Accordingly, David warns us that even though riches abound, we must not set our heart on them. Psalm 62:10. 2. Even if human beings do not free their heart of joy in temporal goods for the sake of God and the demands of Christian perfection, they ought to do so because of the resulting temporal advantages, prescinding from the spiritual ones. By liberating themselves from joy in temporal goods, they not only free themselves from the pestiferous kinds of harm we mentioned in the preceding chapters, but in addition acquire the virtue of liberality. Liberality is one of God's principal attributes, and can in no way coexist with covetousness. Moreover, they acquire liberty of spirit, clarity of reason, rest, tranquillity, peaceful confidence in God, and, in their will, the true cult and homage of God. They obtain more joy and recreation in creatures through the dispossession of them. They cannot rejoice in them if they behold them with possessiveness, for this is a care that, like a trap, holds the spirit to earth and does not allow wideness of heart. 2 Corinthians 6:11. In detachment from things, they acquire a clearer knowledge of them, and a better understanding of both natural and supernatural truths concerning them. Their joy, consequently, in these temporal goods is far different from the joy of one who is attached to them, and they receive great benefits and advantages from their joy. They delight in these goods according to the truth of them, but those who are attached delight according to what is false in them. They delight in the best, the attached delight in the worst. They delight in the substance of them. Those sensibly attached delight in the accidents. The senses cannot grasp or attain to more than the accidents, whereas the spirit, purged of the clouds and appearances of the accidents, penetrates the truth and value of things, which is the object of the spirit. Joy then clouds the judgment like a mist, for there can be no voluntary joy over creatures without voluntary possessiveness, just as there can be no joy in so far as it is a passion, unaccompanied by habitual possessiveness of heart. The denial and purgation of such joy leaves the judgment as clear as the air when vapours vanish. 3. Those then whose joy is unpossessive of things rejoice in them all, as though they possess them all. Those others, beholding them with a possessive mind, lose all the delight of them in general. The former, as St. Paul states, though they have nothing in their heart, possess everything with greater liberty. 2 Corinthians 6:10. The others, insofar as they possess things with attachment, neither have nor possess anything. Rather their heart is held by things, and they suffer as a captive. As many as are the joys they long to uncover in creatures, so many will necessarily be the straits and afflictions of their attached and possessed heart. Cares do not molest the detached, neither in prayer nor outside it, and thus, losing no time, such people easily store up an abundance of spiritual good. Yet those who are attached spend all their time going to and fro about the snare to which their heart is tied, and even with effort they can hardly free themselves for a short while from this snare of thinking about and finding joy in the object to which their heart is attached. At the first movement of joy toward things, the spiritual person ought to curb it, remembering the principle we are here following. There is nothing worthy of a person's joy save the service of God and the procurement of his honour and glory in all things. One should seek this alone in the use of things, turning away from vanity and concern for one's own delight and consolation. 4. There is another exceptional and principal benefit of detachment from joy in creatures, freedom of the heart for God. With this, the soul is disposed for all the favours God will grant it. Without it, he does not bestow them. The favours are such that for each joy the soul renounces out of love of God and evangelical perfection, it will receive 100-fold in this life, as promised in the Gospel. Matthew 19:29, Mark 10:30. Even if such gains were not to be had, the spiritual person would have to quell these joys because of the displeasure given to God through them. In the Gospel, we see that merely because the rich man rejoiced in having stored up goods for many years, God was so angered he told him he must give an account of his soul that very night. Luke 12:20. We should believe, therefore, that as often as we rejoice vainly, God is watching and planning some chastisement and bitter drink according to our merits, for at times the sadness redounding from the joy is 100 times greater than the joy. When St. John says of Babylon in the Apocalypse, what St. John says of Babylon in the Apocalypse is true, that she would receive torment in the measure in which she rejoiced and lived in delights. Revelation 18:7. Yet the text does not mean that the sadness will not be greater than the joy. It shall be greater, since eternal torments are inflicted for brief pleasures. But it indicates that no fault will escape a particular punishment. For he who will punish the idle word will not pardon vain joy. Matthew 12:36. I'm looking at where to finish already. Not because I'm tired of reading yet. Just I don't think I planned it very well yesterday. I haven't figured it out, so... Chapter 21. The vanity of wilful joy in natural goods, and the method of directing oneself through them to God. 1. By natural goods we mean beauty, grace, elegance, bodily constitution, and all other corporeal endowments. Also in the soul, good intelligence, discretion, and other talents belonging to the rational part of humans. People are vain and deceitful if they rejoice in these gifts, only because they or their relatives have them, without giving thanks to God who grants them in order to be better known and loved. As Solomon says, grace is deceitful and beauty vain. She who fears the Lord will be praised. Proverbs 31:30. We are taught in this text that human beings should rather have misgivings about these natural gifts, since through them they can be easily distracted from the love of God, and being allured, fall into vanity and delusion. This is why he says that bodily grace is deceptive, deludes people along the way, and attracts them to inappropriate things through vain joy and complacency with self, or with the possession of this grace. And he declares that beauty is vain, because it causes people who esteem and rejoice in it to fall in countless ways. people should rejoice only if they serve God or others through it. They ought rather to be diffident and fearful lest their natural gifts and graces occasion their offending God by turning their eyes to these gifts in vain presumption or excessive attachment. Those possessing these endowments should be careful and live cautiously, lest through vain ostentation there be the occasion that someone's heart withdraw even 1 iota from God. These natural graces and gifts are such a provocation and occasion of sin, both to the possessor and the beholder, that there is scarcely a heart that escapes from this snare or birdlime. We have observed that many spiritual persons with these endowments have, out of fear, prayed God to disfigure them, lest these gifts be an occasion to themselves or others for some vain joy or attachment. 2. Spiritual persons, then, must purge and darken their will of this vain joy, and bear in mind the following. Beauty and all of the natural endowments are but earth, arising from the earth and returning to it. Grace and elegance are but the smoke and air of this earth, and should be considered and valued as such for the sake of avoiding a lapse into vanity. Regarding these goods, spiritual people must direct their heart to God in joy and gladness that God is himself all this beauty and grace, eminently and infinitely so, above all creatures. As David affirms, all these things will grow old and pass away like a garment, while God alone will remain immutable forever. Psalm 102, 26-27. Accordingly, if one does not turn one's joy to God in all things, it will always be false and illusory. This is the kind Solomon referred to when he spoke to joy in creatures. To joy I said, why do you let yourself be deceived in vain? Ecclesiastes 2:2. That is, when you allow the heart to be allured by the creatures. Chapter 22. The harm resulting from joy of will in natural goods. 1. A good deal of both the harm and benefit I am describing in each of these kinds of joy is common to them all. Because this harm or benefit is the direct result of either joy or detachment from it, no matter what class the joy belongs to, I am mentioning both in each of these categories since, as I say, this harm or benefit is annexed to all these kinds of joy. My main intention, however, is to speak of the particular kinds of harm and benefit arising in the soul by rejoicing or not rejoicing in each of these goods. I refer to them as particular because they are the primary and immediate result of a particular kind of joy. They are only caused by other kinds, secondarily and indirectly. For example, tepidity of spirit is the direct outcome of each and every kind of joy, and so this harm is common to all 6. Yet fornication is a particular evil that follows directly only from joy in natural goods, of which we are now speaking. 2. The spiritual and bodily harm, directly and effectively ensuing from joy in natural goods, can be reduced to 6 principal kinds. The first is vainglory, presumption, pride, and disesteem of neighbour, for a person cannot fasten the eyes of esteem on one object without withdrawing them from others. The result is, at least, a material disesteem of other things, since naturally, when the heart values one thing, it turns from others because of its concentration on this esteemed object. And through this material contempt, it is exceptionally easy in a general or particular way to slip into intentional and voluntary contempt for some of these other things. Such contempt may not only be internal, but manifest itself externally through speech. This is not like that, or so-and-so is not like so-and-so. The second harm is inciting the senses to complacency, sensual delight and lust. The third kind of harm is that this joy induces flattery and vain praises involving deception and vanity, as Isaiah warns, "My people, whoever praises you deceives you." Isaiah 3:12. The reason is that even though sometimes the truth is told in lauding natural grace and beauty, this praise rarely fails to contain some harm, either by causing the person praised to fall into vain complacency and joy, or by directing one's own imperfect affections and intentions toward the person endowed with this beauty. The fourth kind of harm is general, for the reason and judgment of the spirit become very dull, as in the case of joy over temporal goods, and in some ways even duller. Since natural goods are more intimate to a person than temporal goods, joy in them produces its imprint more quickly and effectively, and ravishes more forcibly. Thus the reason and judgment do not remain free, but are clouded by the emotion of a very intimate joy. This gives rise to the fifth harm, distraction of the mind with creatures. The next outgrowth is spiritual lukewarmness and weakness. This sixth harm is also general and usually reaches such a point that it causes the soul to find extreme tedium and sadness in the things of God, even to the extent of abhorring them. Pure spirit is infallibly lost in this kind of joy, at least in the beginning. If some spirituality is felt, it will be very sensible, gross, unspiritual, exterior, and unrecollected. It will comprise sensory pleasure more than strength of spirit. The spirit is so lowly and weak that it does not suppress the habit of this joy, for the possession of the imperfect habit is sufficient to impede pure spirit, even though the acts of joy are not consented to. Consequently, the soul lives more in the weakness of the senses than in the strength it has when occasions of sin arise. Although I do not deny that many virtues can coexist with many imperfections, yet because of the reign of the flesh, which militates, I don't know what that means, which militates against the spirit, Galatians 5:17, there can be neither a pure nor a savoury interior spirit dwelling together with these unquelled joys. And even if the spirit is unaware of any harm, distraction is at least secretly caused. 3. Let us go back to that second kind of harm that contains in itself innumerable other indescribable kinds. The extent and enormity of the disaster arising from joy in natural graces and beauty is patent. Since on account of this joy, we hear every day of many murders, lost reputations, insults, squandered fortunes, rivalries, quarrels, and of so many adulteries, rapes, and fornications, and of fallen saints so numerous that they are compared to the third part of the stars of heaven, cast down to the earth by the tail of the serpent. Revelation 12:4. To fine gold that has lost its beauty and lustre in the mire, and to the illustrious and noble men of Zion, clothed with the best gold, yet esteemed as broken clay jars. Lamentations 4:1-2. There's a footnote in here somewhere that I've missed. I don't know where it is. Oh, maybe I haven't got to it yet. I don't know where the footnote is from. I didn't see it. But it says the text that continues until the end of number 4 in chapter 26 is missing from the Codex of Al-Caudete, 11 folios. At this point, editors follow the ancient Codex of Duruello. I can't see where the footnote is at all. 4. Where does this poisonous harm fail to reach? And who fails to drink little or much from the golden chalice of the Babylonian woman of the Apocalypse? Revelation 17:4. That's where the footnote is, just there. The fact that she is seated on that large beast with 7 heads and 10 crowns signifies that there is hardly anyone of high rank or low, saint or sinner, who does not drink of her wine, subjecting the heart somewhat. For as is pointed out there, all the kings of the earth were inebriated with the wine of her prostitution. Revelation 17:2. She reaches out to all states, even to the supreme and illustrious state of the sanctuary and divine priesthood, by setting her abominable cup in holy places, as Daniel asserts. Daniel 9:27. And she hardly leaves a strong person who has not drunk a small or large quantity of wine from her chalice, which is the kind of vain joy. As a result, it is said that all the monarchs of the earth were inebriated by this wine, since so few will be found, no matter how holy, who have not been somewhat ravished and perplexed by this drink of joy and pleasure in natural beauty and graces. That's the end of 4, the bit that was missing. 5. It is worth remarking that the text says they were inebriated. No matter how small the amount of this wine of joy, it immediately takes hold on the heart and subdues it, producing obscurity in the reason, as happens with those who get drunk from wine. The life of the soul will be in danger of some antidote. The life of the soul will be in danger if some antidote is not taken immediately. For spiritual weakness will augment and bring such evil on the soul that it will find itself captive of its enemies, grinding at the mill like Samson with his eyes plucked out and the hair of his first strength cut. And afterward it will perhaps die the second death, as he did together with his enemies. Judges 16:19-31. This is the harm the drink of this joy will cause spiritually, as it did physically to Samson, and as it does to many today. The enemies of the soul will come and say to it afterward what the Philistines said to Samson, to his great confusion. Were you not the one who snapped the knotted cords, broke the jaws of the lions, killed 1,000 Philistines, pulled out the gates, and freed yourself from all your enemies? 6. Let us conclude then with necessary instructions for the prevention of this poison. As soon as the heart feels drawn by vain joy in natural goods, it should recall how dangerous and pernicious it is to rejoice in anything other than the service of God. One should consider how harmful it was for the angels to have rejoiced and grown complacent in their natural beauty and goods, since they thereby fell into the ugly abyss. And how many evils come on humans every day because of this very vanity. Therefore take courage, and use in time the remedy suggested by the poet for those beginning to grow attached to this joy. Quote, hurry now in the beginning to apply the remedy, for when evils have had time to increase in the heart, medicine and remedies will arrive late. There's a footnote here. Ovid, Remedia Amoris 1, 91-92. Principis obsta sero parator cum mala per longas invaluere moras. Compare the Imitation of Christ 1:13. Look not at the wine, warns the wise man. When its colour is scarlet and it shines in the glass, it enters smoothly but bites like a snake and spreads poison like the basilisk. Proverbs 23:31. I think I'll stop there because it's a good place to stop. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Amen.